I even took down the whole Fire Nation airship armada. And on top of all that, I was more popular than him.
After nearly 20 years, we've finally returned to Team Avatar. The only question I really have is it based on nostalgia or a genuinely good story? What's up, everybody? I'm Johnny2000, focusing on 2000s movies, media, and so much more. And since our beloved Avatar was at the golden era of cartoons, I thought, why not cover it with this new movie out? And yeah, the fact that we have a new movie in 2026 is super exciting. I want to go through the movie and talk about all the connections it made to the original Avatar series, as well as discussing the new era that they seem to be going in for the Avatar studio.
Oh, hello. You look like an avatar from a time quite distant from mine.
So yeah, coming into this, when I heard that this movie was going to come out, I was like a little confused, mainly because like I felt like if they ever got a chance to go back to the original Team Avatar, it would probably be the 4th season, or like the Zuko storyline following his mother, like getting to see these characters once again. Because as you know, like even though the story did technically end at the end of season 3, there was more plot lines that happened through the comic books, and they did a really good job incorporating the original storytellers and making it such a huge deal that they continued their journey. So when I heard that this one was coming out, I was like a little bit nervous, thinking that like maybe they're not going to go with a story that was made by the original creators, and I was cautious. I was cautious and a little bit worried that maybe this would like kind of put them in a weird light.
But there is no cure. No, I can't have cracks.
Let's start off by talking about expectations. Gosh, I love the original series so much. I recently did a rewatch. And my favorite part of it is the fact that they have like this 3-month countdown for Aang to learn all 4 elements. Like that is peak storytelling for me. Aang is a character being like so naive and like unwilling to learn the right way, like looking for shortcuts when it comes to mastering the elements, is a very interesting. And I like how the elements are almost a way of life for them. You know, like each character is attributed to a different element, and the elements are almost like this metaphor for a personality type in a way, where Aang needs to become sensitive and caring in order to understand water. He needs to become rigid in order to learn fire later in the series. I swear, they do it in such a perfect way that really exemplify like what this means deeper than just an action series.
Those words can burn you.
I feel like something that's really important to me is that every character has a beginning, middle, and end arc to how they are, as opposed in a way that like a season of content would do, but you'd have to do it contained in a movie. So mainly character development is my biggest concern going into this movie, because that's 100% what made the original Avatar so good. Just the way the characters had such dynamic relationships with each other and with themselves, and how it kind of came to play. Like, this is definitely the ultimate limitation that you would have to get with a series like this. You objectively don't have as much time as you usually do. Especially continuing a story with a near-perfect ending, like that's really complicated. Of course, we have our favorite characters from the original. We have Katara, who is very strong-willed, cares a lot about doing the right thing, but also is a down-to-earth person. She teaches Aang water, of course, and I love the way her and Aang kind of play out as a relationship, where it's not necessarily mutual at first. Like, it's definitely Aang having a crush on her. Sokka is the only one without bending skills, essentially can only work with what he's given. You know, being younger or being the naive one, he manages to use it to his advantage, especially later in the series. I mean, at first he's like a little immature, especially when he's like dealing with Suki and the Water Princess. Like, I feel like he has a lot of growing to do pretty immediately, and I'm actually really curious to see how he unfolds. You know, he was like the most fun-loving, and for me, like the best comedic relief character, while also being like very serious. Then, of course, we have Toph, who came in the second season, and for being, like, late in the series, it's kind of funny that she becomes one of the most iconic characters. Speaking of strong-headed, she and Katara are both kind of strong-headed and kind of go at each other a lot throughout the series, which is a really dynamic relationship to cover to feminine presenting people. I like that Toph takes on the personality of Stone, where she isn't emotional. She's, if anything, the opposite of Aang in that sense, making it even harder for him to learn earthbending when the time comes for it. So that was something that I really enjoyed in the original series. It also reinvigorated my interest in watching the second season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix series, because as you know, the Netflix series does not get a lot of positive vibes because the showrunners left the series, but I want to kind of get into that a little bit later. Point is, Toph, Sokka, Katara, and Aang make such a dynamic four people. And of course, we have Zuko, who only came in through the third season, and his character arc was super well, like, established, just because, you know, like, he wanted to be a part of the Fire Nation at first. Like, when he starts, like, having all these choices that he chooses to be good, but then also kind of holds back when it comes to being evil, it's just so interesting the way his personality plays out, and then up until the very end, finally joining the group, adding the balance that was necessary since the very beginning. Like, this show just does such a good job at establishing, you know, the time limits that are thrust upon the main characters, their flaws, how they interact with one another, and almost like the idea of unity and friendship. What makes a Nickelodeon movie? So Nickelodeon's best movies, for me at least, were The Rugrats Go Wild, Jimmy Neutron, even the SpongeBob movie. Like, the early 2000s, Nickelodeon had an identity, and to take a TV property and bring it to the big screen, it has to be a big deal. For me, I hate it when they either bring a TV show to a TV movie, which is not necessarily exiting the silver screen like you intend. You know, it's like, you call yourself a movie, but you're not planning on going to theaters, which, by the way, we'll talk about with Avatar too, because that is definitely a concern. And, you know, SpongeBob just did it so well when it had, like, its initial 3 seasons and then did this new adaptation. They almost, like, took a really good trope from, like, The Odyssey and actually made it SpongeBobified. You know, like, Now That We're Men, like, they did a really good job at adapting that and having the characters pop out in a way that they couldn't during the series. It's almost a limitation that works in its favor. And, oh my god, seeing that first trailer when it came out, being like, wow, like, the only way I could see this new movie is if I go to the theaters and hear this surround sound. That's the joy of, like, having a movie, not necessarily just an extra event night hosted on Nickelodeon after one of their crush nights with new episodes coming out. Like, as a nostalgia fan, it's really cool to categorize things and, like, let them be at their time and place. And then, like, the Rugrats, for example, like, they went on for a while before they got their movie. And again, they made it a big event, adding Dill to the mix, which was so cool because in order to, like, really expand your character, in order to really expand your franchise and talk about things that are really important to the cast that can't be addressed on the show, you really have to go all in. And you know what? This is something I wish came out in 2010 when the original movie came out 4 years after the series was over, or 3 years after the series. So yeah, Nickelodeon had this identity of taking these characters and doing a good job with it. You know, you didn't see a lot of Cartoon Network movies get to the big screen. A lot of Disney Channel originals were, like, rarely going to the big screen, with Hannah Montana being one of my favorite exceptions. But it's not like they put the Wizards of Waverly Place movie in theaters, so there was, like, an interesting line that everybody kind of, like, drew invisibly in their head of, like, what is appropriate or not appropriate for the screen. And you know how, like, the directors would almost be different than the ones that would be in the original show, giving it kind of, like, this independent vibe that the story, like, is able to be on its own. And that's the vibe I got while watching this movie in a really exciting way. Like, it felt like I was transported back to the time when this would have come out. So I got, like, kind of a raise in my expectations and my standards for this movie.
All feelings aside, maybe I'm no hero.
Unity is a common theme seen throughout the entire Avatar Last Airbender series, and even more so in this new movie, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So when we finally got to see this movie, I feel like it captured the air of this original Nickelodeon film, like something that had not been seen in quite some time. And the theatrical scale adventure is almost perfect as a standalone story. They're really smart when they decided to focus on specifically air as the thematic concept for this, because they go back to Unity as a theme in the show. So the theme of Unity from the show translated to a movie works really well, and it's almost like, okay, so we have to see Katara, Sokka, Toph, Zuko all understand like their relationship with Unity, what it means to them to have all these 4 elements in line, and what happens when it gets shaken up. And how do you shake up such a important message, especially when we had all these characters getting together? Like, it took us 3 seasons to have them form a relationship that was so strong to give us a position when the movie started out, right? And so my biggest fear with that is that, like, okay, so if they need to have a break in the Unity in order to get it back, who is going to be the one that really suffers from it? Are they going to have every character kind of address the idea of like, oh, maybe they do work together as a unit, or maybe they're not working as a unit? And I feel like focusing on the airbenders in this sense, very interesting. As you know, Aang forms a relationship with an airbender, and throughout the movie, he's given a lot of reasons why Unity almost doesn't work for him. Like, if he really cares about his people, you know, the ones that died before the war that he feels responsible for, this is a really important character flaw that he's going to have to deal with throughout the whole movie. So having this new character come in and almost like mentor him against his own, you know, against all the arcs he's completed throughout the original series was such a good move, because then suddenly, you know, you have Aang dealing with it, and then the disruption actually goes to every person in the cast. Like Katara, her and Aang definitely suffered a lot right off the bat, because he's trying to become one with who he truly is in the show. And we're not dealing with the Fire Nation as much, so, like, who are we gonna deal with? And the fact that it's an air story is even more interesting, because that's how I would have expected the 4th season to go.
My name is Aang, and I'm the Avatar.
And a purpose, the dim lit surface.
Now let's talk about the other properties that have been shown to us, given all up until this very moment. So yeah, we have finally a new Avatar movie. Super excited, but it's not like they didn't try this before. Of course, we have the first original movie from 2010, starring a bunch of white people, whitewashing the entire cast, and just creating a story that was almost void of all the story elements, of all the original plot points that made the original story so unique. I personally felt like the tone was really cool, because at the time we liked darker and grittier type stories. So, you know, of course Avatar needs to be taken that direction. I just think about that SpongeBob game for the GameCube, where it's just SpongeBob and Patrick running away from fire, you know, like the most campy kid show, and it has to be action-packed. That's definitely the vibe they were going for back then, and I thought it was a good idea. But obviously, as a kid, you don't really comprehend how much they were trying to fit into a single movie, and the way they did it was just very distasteful. If anything, I look back and I'm like, I wish it was animated, and or the original showrunners were involved. Like, you could tell that the original showrunners didn't have a hand in the whole thing, and since Twitter, like, a lot of social media wasn't existing, they couldn't, like, stand up for their original vision. And of course, Nickelodeon wanted to capitalize and make the show IP good enough that they could just spin off into any movie they want, any TV show they want. And, you know, it's so funny that, of course, 20 years later now it's actually happening. But with this original movie, like, that was the first test of it all. And it's so interesting because obviously it didn't do well. It was a failure. It didn't get the sequels that it needed and eventually set up. You know, like, they had introduced it as book 1 in a 3-book series. So they were genuinely trying to make an effort to keep the story intact. But you know what? Nickelodeon definitely realized it was a failure. And with that, no other Avatar stuff was coming out. And it was even more frustrating that, like, that was the signal to stop making new Avatar stuff. Because, like, here we are in retrospect, and it's like, oh my god, they made the biggest mistake ever. They could have capitalized on Avatar at the prime of its existence. And you know what? It's funny to think about it in terms of SpongeBob, because SpongeBob did go down that route. They had a successful movie, and then they continued the show because of how successful it was. Imagine Avatar: The Last Airbender immediately was super popular from the live-action movie. They did get a 4th and 5th season, and then it went down the same track SpongeBob did. It makes me wonder if, like, that was meant to happen, because, I don't know, I don't always think everything that happened was meant to be. So, like, a weird part of me is, like, it would have been nice if right at the time that this original movie came out, it was successful, it did have the next 2 movies, and or that ruined its reputation even worse. Like, there's so many combinations of, like, moving pieces that would have made this an entirely different situation. Like, we might not even be looking at a new Aang movie in 2D and in this place and time. It's also funny to think that, like, not a lot of 2D movies are popular anymore. Like, it's almost vintage to make a movie in 2D. Like, they had The Day the Earth Blew Up by the Looney Tunes a couple years ago, but for the most part, all movies that come to the theaters are CGI or to some extent 3D. I remember when My Little Pony came out, that was like the first time in a while, Teen Titans Go, that like these theaters were seeing this 2D animation. Like, there's something about it that almost like was like, oh, we've moved past that. We've gotten to bigger and better technology. But no, this is really nice that it's brought back to form at a time where retro is actually coming back and 2000s nostalgia is appreciated. So there's no better time than to have Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender, come back at this point. It was pretty radio silent for quite some time, you know, like, the reflection of the movie looked horrible. This was also a time when the Mario movie, like, looked horrible. Like, it just, franchises being put to the big screen did not have a good head on its shoulder. Personally, I like to think about how it's all about the people who consume the media. You know, like, it was written by adults at that time, so they didn't get what was special about Avatar. And here today, it's like everybody knows Avatar. Like, of course they're going to make it as special as they can. And you know what? We'll get into how awesome the crew and cast pulled everything together with that in mind. But at this time, like, it was just silent.
Collecting and protecting, collecting and protecting, collecting and protecting, collecting and protecting. Every crime.
I was also excited because The Legend of Korra, I felt like, did a really good job at continuing the Avatar: The Last Airbender series. Like, as good as you could do without spoiling the original. Like, they told a really good independent story with standalone characters that almost respected the legacy of the original IP. And that was a great show. Like, I feel like there was definitely, like, some mixed reviews about it, maybe because, like, the expectations of, you know, the original series just, like, set it a little bit too high. They didn't have that 3-month countdown that added the pressure to the characters. They gave Korra a little bit more flaws than the usual character, but I swear there was just so many positive things about it that it's hard for me to look at that show with some negative vibes. I know the second season for me was, like, kind of a drag. I don't remember loving everything I was seeing, but I did like the world building and everything that they were bringing back that made it, like, worth seeing. And then the third season definitely picked up, and the fourth season was just, oh my god, pretty much shelved by Nickelodeon. From a story point, like, it was really good, and I was so excited. I was so excited about what they were building from a story point, but just the fact that a lot of fans were, like, falling off. It had that 2010s, like, vibe where it was grittier and it was intense and it was everything I think they knew we wanted from the original series, but not enough people were watching it.
Aang, As an airbender, it's important that you know when to show restraint.
So nothing was coming out from the Avatar series except for the comic books, which, of course, if you were a mainstream fan, you had no idea of. And I feel like Avatar's mainstream is just as important as like some of its major fans, because it's nice to have a whole backing community to support this franchise. And when Netflix decided, hey, we're gonna actually bring back the series, oh my gosh, what a different world we were living in. Yeah, like imagine you're like in the early 2020s and you're like, oh my god, they're gonna bring back Avatar. That's a crazy concept. So yeah, we were hearing like buzzings about it for quite some time. Is Avatar gonna come back in live action? Who knows? Is that the real reason it should come back, you know, just to be live action? Like, we're still not gonna get a continuation of the story. And above all that, it's like Netflix, so guaranteed not theatrical. Very interesting. I remember like thinking my expectations were super low because obviously the movie was so bad originally, and I'm like, okay, all they have to do is be not as bad as that original movie. And yeah, that's when we heard that, of course, the original showrunners were involved. Oof, yes, finally, the original showrunners are going to maintain the integrity of Avatar: The Last Airbender and the theatrical release, and the show would be just as good as the original. Gosh, I wish this were the case, but unfortunately, within like a couple months, we learned that they were off the project. What? Like, why in the world would they do that? I think this was also around the time they announced there would be multiple projects, not just the Netflix ones. So the showrunners knew that they had a lot of room to tell their story the way they wanted to tell it. And the fact that they couldn't work with Netflix to make this happen was even more stressful. Like, they're willing to give the showrunners anything they want. So how could they mess up? How can Netflix mess up so bad that they would walk away? You know, like, I would give these showrunners anything they want just to make the story intact. So this put a really bad taste in not only my mouth, but every Avatar fan. And I consider myself more of a casual Avatar fan. Like, I know about the whole story from beginning to end from like a story perspective, but I haven't seen it like 5 or 6 times like most of the fans. So obviously, like, I was more stressed for them, but also, like, it was important I liked it too, because if they could please a fan like me, maybe there was a good chance that Avatar would come back just as strong as ever. Then we got the Netflix Avatar series. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I could only get through the first 2 episodes, and you know, a lot of my friends, us Millennial and Gen Z who grew up loving the Avatar, also had trouble digesting what we were shown. I mean, a lot of fairness should go to the Netflix series. Like, they were dealt a really complicated hand, knowing that the fans might not be on their side, knowing that the story had to be messed with even just a little bit. And this is something that kind of bothers me too. Like, I feel like something that people like give it grace on is that you only get like 8 episodes to tell a story. These episodes are like an hour long. So technically, if you take 8 episodes and split it into an hour, you got 24 episodes, essentially longer than the original series. So you don't really have the excuse to maneuver the story in a way that's time relevant, you know, like it just seems like they don't have to worry about that at all. It's not actually working against them. So yeah, my reaction was very complicated because I felt like they did keep the story intact, but at the time I was watching like One Piece. The story was nearly identical when they brought it to live action, and One Piece did a great job at keeping the characters contained while actually condensing like almost 50 episodes worth of material. So they had a little bit less to work with, and what I saw was like a very cinematic, enjoyable experience that I was like, oh my god, Avatar: The Last Airbender just needs to be 10% of this in order to be a really good success. And yeah, I was just so hyped. Like, I felt like the music, the cinematography, that show just like set me out to really enjoy Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, I was so excited. But then, you know, I feel like the way they unraveled Aang's story from the very beginning already kind of brought me to a cautious place. With all the One Piece expectations I had, like, I didn't think it would have been that hard to do. And they overcomplicated it a lot, which I was not super happy with. I wish they almost condensed it to make it a simpler story so we could actually get into the minds of the actors that were going through the motions of the live action series. Because, you know, in cartoons, you don't focus on that too much because they're cartoons. Like, sometimes you wouldn't stare at their expression and try to translate it, but you do that with live action people. It makes it a really interesting story when you get to do that. And I felt like that one didn't really work out for me. I will vouch, on the other hand, for the second season. I just watched the entire second season of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix series, and I was very pleasantly surprised. Maybe because they finally added Toph, and it like gave a more complete picture of what they were trying to go for. A lot of people are complaining because Aang is like super older than he was in the original, but I don't necessarily find that to be a bad thing. They justify it story-wise. But yeah, they had, again, 7 episodes, all an hour each, given essentially 21 episodes worth of content. So they did a better job at just sticking to the storyline and not changing too much. They did change like a bunch of like small details that I think are really important and maybe some fans might have issue with. But for the most part, the biggest sin of that second season is still the fact that the showrunners weren't involved. I like to believe that maybe they fixed a lot of the things the showrunners might have had issue with in the original walking away from Netflix. But this time around, like it feels a lot more complete. So if you didn't like the first season, I would definitely get back into it. But yeah, that's where we like kind of left off in terms of reviving Avatar. Right when it like got its super big surge in like 2021 during the pandemic, when everybody was on Netflix rewatching the series, it's just so funny because you can't react in a timely manner, like knowing that everybody was so into it at the time. Like greenlighting all these projects was kind of risky because you're kind of saying like, you know that they like the property, but are they going to like it again in 4 years? The same way Nickelodeon like just assumed it was bad. Now they're actually getting back into it. So that's where this movie comes into play. And even more surprising, like they have the artwork for Seven Havens set up where there's actually a twin Avatar, really cool. And we'll look at the trailer before it's over. Yeah, they're working with a lot. So there's a lot of expectations. The expectations of the Korra fans, the expectations of the Netflix fans, if there are fans from the Netflix series, and the expectation of just the original series going back to what it once was. And that's what leads us into Avatar: Aang.
Protection. You're an airbender, but you're also the Avatar.
Aang, he's got the staff.
Yeah! Kick his butt, Mega Aang!
No! Something's wrong! The power is corrupting him!
The animation is phenomenal. I can't like overstate enough how well they worked with 3D, like some CGI moments, and then just traditional 2D animation in a way that the original series really could have benefited from when it first came out. You know, like as you could remember, it was in 4:3, so we got those side black bars on the original series. Like it was made at a time where TVs were different sizes. So seeing this for the first time in HD really made me feel nostalgic right away. I'm wondering how much of this entire movie and like how much I enjoyed it was like just the animation, because even when like Aang is climbing that mountain and everything is falling, it's like I was perfectly fine seeing 5 minutes without dialogue and just straightforward action scenes. It almost like feels like action movies are kind of like musicals, but instead of breaking into song, they break out into a fight with two characters having like both of their goals in mind and like battling it out and just kind of coming to an understanding by the end. And told through animation is just such an impressive way to do it. Seeing Aang go up against this new villain and, you know, be at odds with them and then have such a emotionally fueled fight sequence, oh my god, it's just so powerful. Like you could tell that a lot of the fans that like really love the series knew the way that these were supposed to play out. I like that we revisit the original series in the beginning with new backstory that's like kind of capturing a moment that we never got in the series, like Avatar and Roku, for example. It takes us back to the original show, and just the lighting in the animation is just, it's gorgeous. I can't thank this movie enough for bringing back everything I was hoping we would get. And then, spoiler alert, if you didn't see the entire movie, way toward the end when they go into the spirit world is when we actually get like a full-on reunion. You know, like they have matured up all the characters pretty significantly, and you know, there's us fans that are a little bit anxious about like getting introduced to the new animations, but they actually pull you back a little bit and show you some of the character animations from the original. Like, you get to see Sokka as his original self. Katara kind of, like, looks like her grandmother, and they actually made it fit in with the story. Like, the spirit world, like, time doesn't matter, so they had a great excuse to bring back these 2D animations, and that is, like, fan service to its core. Like, if I didn't like the rest of the movie, which I did, this would have been the moment that, like, really connected me to the original series. And yeah, just going back through that was everything to me. I feel like even revisiting the spirit world, like, that is essentially what Aang was doing in the whole series, is, you know, like, having this problem and kind of seeking out guidance and only getting it through, like, answers in the spiritual world.
I've always known that I would have to face the Fire Lord, but now I know I need to do it alone.
His story after defeating the Fire Lord, I was the most interested out of everybody, which is perfect. You want a main character that's flawed enough that you want to follow their story, especially over the other ones. Like, we're all excited to see Katara again, Sokka, Toph, but how are you going to keep me interested in Aang's story? And they do a great job at making it all about the backstory coming back up again, which also cleverly avoids the Zuko storylines that they were about to get started on, and even defeating the Fire Lord. Like, there's a lot of unaddressed things that you clearly, like, want to be caught up on, but the storytellers, you know, the original writers of this show are basically like, we're going to tell you an even more important story that you forget about how important it was where you left off. And yeah, I'm not usually one for, like, growing up the characters a lot, but this time they did it really well. And seeing Aang actually be, like, super playful in the way he once was, despite being an adult, was done really well. I know it's actually complicated because I thought everybody would have a weird reaction to the fact that all the voice characters were recast, but luckily, like, all the original voice actors, like, almost really wanted this to happen too, where they're actually getting people that are ethnically closer to what they were going for in the original series. It brings this kind of depth that you don't expect an animation to have, but we're so grateful that it's there. And when you're watching, like, there's a part of you that feels a little bit more nostalgically connected to it, mainly because, like, you know that the writers wanted that. Like, you know that that is how they originally intended it to go. The facial expressions, like, everything is just a lot more alive than it used to be. And it's like, it's nice to look back at the original Avatar and actually be like, yeah, that actually wasn't as good as animation could have been pushed to. But now that we're, like, here in daily life, like, it is pushed to the perfect, it's pushed to actually be, like, the most up-to-date animation you've ever seen. The chemistry between all the characters was a little jarring at first because I wasn't sure how they would interact with each other without having, like, the same common goal right off the bat. But they do a really good job at catching us up in the beginning of where everybody has been for quite some time and then where they are going to go throughout this movie. Toph was one of the most interesting ones for me because I feel like she went through a lot despite the fact she wasn't just a part of Aang's storyline in the first series. Like, this one would actually show her being an active part, and her working with Zuko working with Katara, like, just seeing them, like, be more seasoned and, like, comfortable around each other, like, it's so cool because you enter the ordinary world being so positive and a lot of good vibes because of everything Aang did for society. Like, that was really, like, a bright light in a dark world. taking us right back to when it got dark again was just such an interesting choice, because then you get to see who these people are in relation to that. Like, when something negative or complicated comes back up, how does Katara react? How does Toph react? And how does Zuko react, of all people? And I felt like Zuko was definitely like the most interesting addition, because he was still new to Team Avatar toward the end of the original series, and you know, having that gap of like not being able to see what happened, whatever, with him and his mother, that would have been complicated anyway. But you know what? We get a lot of fun sides of him, and not just like serious, like exactly who we knew Zuko to be, but he's playful now. There's like that whole joke about the new character being attractive, and then everybody online was like, oh my god, Zuko's bisexual. But really, it's just like, you could just compliment another man. Like, it's fine, guys. But yeah, it definitely made it feel like a lot more fun of an experience, because it's like 2000s Nickelodeon classic to just be joking about stuff in a serious situation. Of course, Sokka brought back just as much comedy as possible. When he's like steering the ship, it's so definite. It's just exactly what you would expect him to be joking about. Like, they just nailed every beat to perfection with this movie. The idea of going into this giant void and getting to the end to find this magical staff is just such a great common goal that actually connects not only like the good characters, but the evil characters. Another set of characters were the rebellions. Try or the turn to smoke. Gone are the days we sit and pray at the root of Crax's vein. The fact that we actually get to see the rebellion in this movie again, like showing that they did have antagonists to begin with, is the perfect story reason to not suspect this new airbender to be the evil one. I watched this movie thinking that Aang, Katara, Zuko, and everybody, they were against the rebellion, you know, like the non-benders. That was exciting. And then seeing that Aang saved one of them, like, it definitely solidified his character as still being a good person, despite the fact that there's a lot of like negative things going on. And seeing that, and assuming they were the antagonists, also trying to get to the staff, like, it was just the perfect distraction. Then we have time actually on the ship where the characters weren't exactly like rushing to get to where they were supposed to go. We got to see them in a more playful mode. Like Aang learning more airbending skills from this new guy, understanding more about his backstory and hearing about everything that happened after he was away, and like seeing the slight resentment in this man's eyes. Whew, oh my god, that was dramatic storytelling perfection. I was so interested in how Aang and this new guy would rub off on each other, and I feel like it was a lot smarter than I thought. Like, bringing in a new character this late into a game, somebody that didn't firsthand experience everything that the war had in effect to the Avatar world, like, that was just crazy to me. Like, I felt like I was watching through a new perspective and kind of understanding where the new guy was coming from. And it's so cool to have a villain that isn't necessarily evil for evil's sake, but a three-dimensional character that has his own flaws and is actually working for something he considers to be good, which is saving his people. Which leads me to the most important part of the movie for me, is when he kills Team Avatar. Ooh, spoiler alert. Yeah, so when this character ends up attacking the rest of Team Avatar, we learn that they actually die. Something that we didn't really see a lot of in the original series of a main character. Like, to think all the characters you grew up loving and caring about, like knowing their goals inside and out, empathizing with one, knowing how they work as a unit, but then are completely obliterated. Like, there is no lower low that you could put the character of Aang through than having his own friends die in front of him or adjacent to him. Like, that was a heartbreaking moment for me when I saw this, like, in real time. I can't believe how well it's it's done, because that's such high stakes and definitely credible for an entire movie. You know, the same way the SpongeBob movie had that scene with SpongeBob and Patrick, like, finally crying. Like, that was an emotionally moved moment, and only the creators of Avatar seemed to be the ones to capture a Nickelodeon original movie since, because the SpongeBob movies are not doing it in the way they used to, and the fact that Avatar can come back and prove that it can be done, that is interesting. So yeah, a really complicated character that adds so many stakes to Aang, and Aang just watches people die constantly, and it is really depressing. So like, to see him still be like kind of chipper and even energetic after something like happens that intensely, that's how you know you really want to follow his journey. And yeah, just watching all the air nomads, like, what a great experience. And him being visited by people that we never got to see throughout the entire series, or like even the former avatars, like, they didn't even have to do that, but the fact that they narratively found a way to work around that and have it be a part of Aang accomplishing his goal in this movie, super important. And I just like that they just didn't feel underutilized. It felt like they gave character arcs to all the characters, like, in a way that served the story. It felt like there was one story going on, and yet 6 stories going on. And that's what I really, really appreciated.
Give up control. Why? Too much life.
Now, I was really curious what everybody felt about, like, the music and sound effects, because, again, like, I mean, I hate to just keep praising this movie. This world was built so much further than I expected, with hearing a lot of the old motifs from the original series come back. Like, that's something that is really hard to do, especially when we're not in the same environments. The characters are a lot more mature, and I like that the score reflected this maturity. Like, they knew that we grew up just as well as these main characters, and like, to add that extra layer of nostalgia, bringing us back while also not necessarily like reverting to older sounds. Like, they made it feel like a modern movie with the score and how they unloaded it. I'm really curious to think of like all the Gen Z or millennial musicians that got involved in this project, you know, like, just the fact that like you have different people because we're in a different era, you know, like everybody that was recording instruments for the original series, like, they couldn't have all come back. So what was like the new energy, and how did it recreate old energy? That's the part that like I feel is the most nostalgic for me, at least, because the music was like a very important part of like all the different tribes that existed. And now that you have each of the main characters representing a different tribe, like the earth, water, fire, and air, you know, like that needs to be established through music. And you got a little bit of every season of Avatar throughout this experience. So if you guys are like big music nerds or care a lot about like old recurring themes, you're definitely gonna get some really good vibes from this movie, because it did good. It did good with that, that's for sure.
Pretty good landing. Whoa! Humans!
Now let's talk about weaknesses. What could this have possibly done better? And honestly, guys, I'm having trouble coming up with weaknesses. I feel like it's the story I never thought I wanted in an Avatar experience. It definitely didn't stray away from Korra, which is kind of a good thing. I was worried that, honestly, they were going to try to bury Korra with this whole experience, and I don't think they did that. I think they, like, almost respected it in the sense that they found the perfect in-between between the original series and going into Korra, because they just knew what worked after that. You know, because Korra dealt a lot more with death, and in a way that, like, they never did in the original series. Mainly because not a lot of kids were watching Nickelodeon anymore, so they could touch topics like that. That's, you know, that's the same way that we got death introduced in this new movie. Like, it's a higher stakes situations, so more lore that is, like, important. It's also cool that, like, the original creators were at the helm of this. I mean, I can't, like, get over that enough. Like, they're the people who know this show the best. You know, like, these people, this is their baby. And, you know, they really got to have fun putting this together. And I love it when a movie feels like a love letter to something that already happened, but also not necessarily cloud what they want to do.
She's been caught. So what?
It also makes me wonder where they're going with everything. Like, this movie sets up a lot. Like, it feels like it's, like, just starting at, like, one point and taking us, you know, on a singular journey. But it really doesn't feel like that. And I was surprised the other day when this movie dropped, and we also dropped the Avatar 7 Havens trailer. So yeah, the Avatar 7 Havens, this time the biggest difference with this Avatar is that it's a pair of twins. So I'm assuming they're going to do like this light and dark vibe, actually covering like yin and yang. And honestly,
They don't know what they need, so we blame the air we breathe. Where's their responsibility?
it bothers me because this is also how my musical goes. I'm not sure if you saw on the internet, but I made a bunch of music videos using songs from my musical in the Avatar universe because I felt like it was a really good example of like what I was going for musically when I was doing it. My show is called The Consequences of Victoria Gray, and basically it follows this girl that's born without emotions, and she has to master the elements of grief, resentment, and she has to go through all of this for the first time. So it gave me like that spiritual vibe I was going for.
A brand new world up to my design. Rather unrest than let them cross a line.
And I ended up putting these all on the internet, and YouTube just took them all down, of course. But it is cool to think that, like, there's just... that their heads are, like, going toward the future, and they don't see this ending. You know, like, when they announced Avatar Studios, you know, before this even had a trailer, everybody, like, kind of didn't really know what that meant. Like, did that mean they were gonna do a 4th season? Did they do this? Like, they said a bunch of projects, but they never said, like, the issue. Or they never said what they were doing with the projects. Oh, speaking of which, it really bothers me that this movie was announced to be in the theaters. Why was this not in the theaters? The movie is so well done. It feels like a theatrical movie. It feels like going back to the nostalgia. So why can't we go back to the theaters? Millennials and Gen Z are probably the people that are in the theaters the least nowadays, so why not take the one property that Paramount has and actually put it in the theaters for us all to go to? Me and my friends have been talking about this movie for quite some time. And so when I found out it was only coming to streaming services, when I found out that I couldn't invite all my friends to go to this outing, see it more than one time, I was like pretty disappointed, and it doesn't work in its favor. Like story-wise, character-wise, why does everything have to be so perfect just for the marketing to fall flat and actually make everybody question if they're even taking this property seriously? Now that everything has been announced and we see Avatar 7 Havens coming out. Apparently a new chapter book is coming out alongside this. Yeah, check that out. Look it up. It seems like they are willing to take this seriously. It's just Paramount almost is like kind of messing up when it comes to the distribution of it all. Because, you know, even marketing can tell a story. And it feels like it's telling us to keep our expectations lower. With the 3rd season of the Netflix series still coming out, like, you have to imagine they need to set us up for a successful future, for multiple spin-offs, for all this. But you know what? It feels like they're trying to hide out of shame. And, like...
Why do their words defy their sense?
Yeah, no, me and my friends would have filled up those theaters so hard. I was looking forward to it. Like, the day they said it was going to go on streaming services made me think that, like, oh, they don't believe in this movie. That maybe this movie isn't going to be quality. That it's going to be suffering the same fate the Netflix does. But you know what? At this point, I feel like it's the opposite. Where it's like, if something's shelved, you know it's going to be too good for the mass audiences. That they're like, no, this is not happening. Because now the Netflix one doesn't get good vibes. And of course, it has a 3rd season already on its way. So what are we trying to communicate here? Seven Havens looks really cool, just in the fact that the art style is slightly off compared to the original and even the Legend of Korra. I like that it's slightly more cartoony, but still the original series vibes in it. Like that I feel like is going to work in its favor really well. And it only makes me question if they are definitely planning on going back to this original Team Avatar and re-exploring Zuko's story that we were supposed to get in Season 4. Sure, like, it might be a little too late, and everything we just found out about in this movie might contradict it, but you know what? If these showrunners were able to turn around, know exactly where to start in the story, know exactly where to take us, I trust them to take this property exactly where it's meant to go. And that's how you know the Netflix series was kind of like not positive, because they weren't the same writers, they weren't the storytellers that came up, so there wasn't that like immediacy. The biggest weakness of this entire movie is just the fact it's not in theaters. You know, like, it really breaks my heart, and I don't think I'm gonna ever get over it. But at least, like, they're using the marketing to spearhead maybe another generation of making this work. I know now that they're putting it in some screens in New York and in California, that this actually makes them eligible for Oscars, you know, like Oscar season, and maybe it'll get, like, a good score. I don't know. All I know is me and my generation are going to advocate for this movie, and if you guys are watching my channel, please help us. Like, we need this movie to get all the recognition it needs, just so Paramount knows that they made a mistake by not letting it go right to theaters. Like, that is money on the table you guys could have taken, but you didn't. I also think newcomers could understand this movie. You know, like, I really wish I was like, I could, you know, have a test audience of people that were our age when this original show came out, you know, like 6 to 11, and have them react to the movie, like, see if, like, they care enough about it, because it has a lot of lore and opens a lot of questions that make you curious to find the answer. So I'm very curious if newcomers would actually respond to this, because the characters on their own seem like they start within this story and end perfectly by the end of their character arc. Like, it wouldn't be surprising if this worked out really well already. Like, if we could just have more runtime and more like excitement toward the original series, toward more iterations of this show, wow. Like, I really hope there's, like, not only a sequel to this movie, but another season of Avatar. As long as the showrunners are at the helm, I don't care if you're doing 5 new series, 2 new series, just don't be like Netflix and just cross it out and just try to make do without the author. You know, like it's so interesting to hear, like, the properties working without their authors. Like, I'm sure there's, like, a giant case to be made here specifically about why this does or does not work because of the authors of the project's involvement and Nickelodeon and Paramount's mishandling of it all. It's just such an interesting case study on just what works and what doesn't in kids animation, because the fact that we could all revert back to 2D and really enjoy it and feel like we're given the story that we've always wanted back in 2010, it would make all of these other projects that stumbled their way through worth it. You know, like, I'm okay watching the Avatar Netflix knowing that the showrunners are working on a different way to tell me the right story of it. You know, like, the property is so rich in metaphors and feelings that I just feel like I can explore this all day. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the whole movie and the upcoming, you know, where Avatar is going from here. I would love to know your guys' thoughts down in the comments, how much this show means to you, and just, like, are you planning on sticking around? Are you a Gen Z or millennial that would have went to the theaters and would have supported this since the very beginning? I know I was, and I'm surprised with how little they understand that, as the marketing team is like, they're trying to gear towards us, but not put it out in a way that we want to consume it. I mean, me and my friends are all watching it from home. It just sucks that it's not something that'll bring us together. You know, unity is a big theme of the movie, so why can't it be a theme of the marketing? Yeah, that's something I like to question. That's how I feel about, like, when I'm marketing my own stuff. It's like, You know, you kind of have to bring the story that you want to tell into the production itself. And that's what they did with the Gen Z and millennial writers and directors and like storyboard artists that came in. Like, you could find a lot of people on Instagram that are showing how good how included they were in this whole process. I've never like gotten to see a movie release and then everybody be like, oh, this is how I did the animatic, this is how I did this. Everybody my age got to be a part of this, and I love that that worked in its favor and made the story rich and strong. But you know what? It didn't work in the marketing. So yeah, Unity really did like bring home an important, relevant message for this show. And hopefully it comes back in other ways too. Yeah, but like, please look up these people and like support them. And maybe like the next generation of Avatar will be completely in our hands one day and we'll know what to do with it. But yeah, thank you so much to the showrunners that brought us Avatar back. And actually, like, they must have went through so much in this last 20 years watching their child, you know, be adapted into Netflix and like moved around, and like, dang, like, I'm sure a little bit of the audience was lost at each iteration, and to have the
No, this isn't the best time.
I'm getting old, you know. My body doesn't move like it used to.
I'm kind of in the middle of something.
to have like the huge burden of like not only reintroducing the old Avatar series, but what made it better, like that pressure, that pressure must be a lot. So the fact that this movie is just so perfect, I know it can't be shown on billboards, I know it can't be thrown into theaters the way it deserves, but I really do hope that the internet, my channel, and all of us could work together to let the next generation know that this needs to be continued. 2D animation is not dead. You know, like, we need to revisit nostalgia with a whole new lens and actually be responsible for what we're trying to create now. And you know what? It definitely empowers me to do much of it myself. So my new album for The Consequences of Victoria Gray is coming out on August 2nd. I would love it if you guys showed me some support. You know, check, there's the link below in the bio. But this inspires me to make my own IP, and I really hope I can be just as successful as the showrunners, despite everything they've gone through. And I really hope that Nickelodeon doesn't try to take my IP and start making it into other things too. But yeah, this was all a big conversation in a nutshell, and I'm sorry I was like so unorganized with the way I set this up. I just really wanted to have a say in the culture. I just really wanted to have a voice in the cultural conversation that is Avatar: The Last Airbender, because I want to stop making the mistakes we've made these past 10, 20 years of just remaking stuff, redoing it. Like, there is a time and a place. I've been watching the new iCarly, the new Wizards of Waverly Place, and it seems like people never know when it's working or when it's not working, or how to communicate to the audiences that they're actually making these products for. That's why all of us are flocking back to YouTube and not these movie theaters, because clearly we have an inkling of what actually works for Avatar. And you know what? Like, power to us. Let's make this next generation even better. Thank you guys so much for watching Johnny 2000. If you haven't seen my other videos, this is like my side channel. I have a main channel where I go over seasons of TV shows one at a time. And I don't know, I have a lot of fun doing it. So I would love your guys' support in like hyping up these 2000 shows, because they deserve it, guys. Like, I can't believe how much intention and art went into these projects of the 2000s. Like, it's so impressive, and I cannot spend more than enough of my time praising it for everything it did. So thank you guys so much for listening to me and like joining me on my channel. This is really such a fun experience, and I'm so grateful to be able to do it with you guys. Thank you guys so much, and have a great day.
People experience magic every day. The way we think, the way we feel. People don't realize it's magical, because we have magic in the form of amulets.
And the only one trusted to guard them? The one with no feelings at all.
Anger, resentment, only see you dropping more people that you cannot feel. Have you ever wondered?
Wonder? I chose to.
Echo, do you know what's worse than cracks? losing people you love.
So I'm deciding more than their consequences. I'm deciding their purpose.
If I don't see the danger, then what's the issue? I've no cracks like Kumari. I need no tissues.
Is there something you're trying to avoid? Can collect, but won't protect the truth. I've never been scared of the sun till I saw it fall. Didn't tell me what to do.
She gave her love, so I loved it. Independent, another sentient memory.
Use the amulet with your feelings, not to stop them.
Crystal moon, capable of erasing negative memories. Cool, right?
Don't